Okay, everybody, welcome again. Thank you for joining us for this presentation of Sage Paperless. Today we have Jacob Salazar with us. He is going to be doing the Sage Paperless webinar demo. He is our Action's Sage Paperless expert. He is, as you can see, an application consultant for us and does an amazing presentation. So I'm excited to have you here and excited to have Jacob here. A few quick accolades from Action. This tells you kind of our size and how many customers we have. We have a lot of Sage customers like you guys. And then also kind of covers the different industries that our reach covers. And then I also like to point out that we have 2 company-owned data centers in case you don't already have your Sage products hosted by us. That is always a great option for people who like to have a little anytime access to their Sage products. So that's basically all I have. Here's Jacob's contact information for you. And I am going to pass it over to Jacob.
All right, thank you, Lauren.
That was super short and sweet, huh?
Looks like I got that presenter access now, so I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. Let's just jump right into it. So what I'm going to go through today is what most customers, the main reason why they purchase paperless, which is, invoice entry. There's 2 components to paperless. One is the invoice entry process, which is what we refer to as AP flow. And that's going to allow you to enter in your invoices, code them, send them out for approval to your approvers that you have set up within paperless. Once those approvals are received and the invoice is fully approved, then you will then export it into the accounting system. So that's one component of paperless, is the AP flow. The second is document management and being able to store all of those other types of backup files that are not invoices. So, subcontracts, purchase orders, receiving tickets, packing slips, even lien releases, certificates of insurance, things like that. Those are all documents that you can potentially store in paperless. So instead of sticking those in a file cabinet or in a folder, you're going to stick those in paperless and electronically file them away. But I'm going to kind of talk about both of those all within one. And I'm going to go through an invoice example, start to finish, so we can see what that process is going to look like in paperless. Now, if you see me shrinking my screen just like I'm doing now, okay, don't worry, you're not going to have to do this. I'm only having to do this because I can only share one screen at a time, right? Paperless does work best if you have dual monitors, which most people do. So if you see me doing that, then just, have it in the back of your head. You won't have to do this later. If you have dual monitors, it's going to be a breeze to work with paperless. So I have some documents here on my desktop, and I'm going to use this invoice sample here, and I'm going to capture this into paperless. Now, you'll notice that within my paperless screen, I have various different tabs up top. One of those is a capture tab. And I have a few capturing options up here, but to be honest, most users of paperless don't even use these options here. Most users rely on the drag and drop method to bring in their documents into paperless. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do with this one. I'm going to grab this invoice sample, and as soon as I hover over my paperless screen, I'm going to have 8 different options of where I can send this document. So depending on what it is and what I want to do with it, okay, will determine which box I'm going to drop it into. Now, the 2 that are mainly used for invoice capturing are going to be these 2 right here. So let's first start off with this push to queue. Before I drop it into here, let me explain what a queue is in paperless. So I like to equate your queue in paperless to your desk at work, right? When you want somebody to work on something, you're going to go place it, walk over and place it on their desk. Okay, your queue serves that same function in paperless. I'm going to drop it in and push it to this person's queue so that they can see it and begin working on it. So I'm going to drop it into this push to queue. This will open up our image in the background, but it also brings up this push to queue box where I can very easily select which queue I want to send it to. Now the queues in paperless, you'll notice I have some individual queues like this Jacob Salazar, Kathy Sherman's queue, but you can also have some shared queues. And that's where I have this invoice entry queue. So let's say you have multiple processors that complete your invoice entry. Then you can have one invoice entry queue that all of those processors have access to. Okay, so that way they're working off of the same list, and also you don't have to worry about divvying out all your invoices. You can just send them to one centralized location, and everybody can recognize that, hey, this queue is for invoices right here. Okay, and that's what I'm going to do with this one. I'm going to send it to this invoice entry queue. I'm going to click OK, and it looks like nothing has happened. But if I close out and I go to AP Flow Invoice Entry, then you'll notice down here on the bottom, there's my document that I just pushed to this queue. Okay, so that's one way to capture. And that drag and drop method that I just showed you, that's going to work from, dragging it from a folder, also dragging it directly from an email. Okay, so if you have an AP inbox that vendors send invoices to, you'll be able to drag the attachment straight from that email into Paperless as well. Now, the other option that was available, the one right next to push to queue, is split. So I'm sure everybody on this call has experienced, sometimes vendors, whenever they send you invoices electronically, that they might get a little lazy on you, right? And when they send you multiple invoices, instead of breaking those up into individual separate attachments, they'll just include them and jumble them all into one, right? And leave the splitting and sorting up to you. Well, typically what the process is you'd have to print those out, rescan them in separately. Well, with Paperless, you don't have to do that. Okay, let's say this example that I'm about to bring in, maybe there's 5 invoices within this one PDF. I'm going to drop it into split here, and that's going to open up my document splitter. Okay, and Paperless even has a thumbnail view that we can take advantage of. That way we can see when one page, one document begins and ends, right? So clearly we see here that our document, this first one, is 5 pages long, okay, with the last page being page 6. Now, right now, Paperless views this document as one document that's 32 pages long, okay? We have to tell it otherwise. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click on page 6 because that looks like the last page of this document. And you'll notice there's a ribbon here that says use the space bar to place a page break between the pages. So I'm going to hit my space bar, okay? And you'll notice that it puts a page break right after page 6. Okay, maybe my next invoice is a 5-pager. Okay, I'm going to go to that 5th page. I'm going to hit another space bar. Okay, and I'm just going to very easily, very quickly, manually put in my page breaks of how I want Paperless to break these up. So one added plus to this split feature is that I can actually, if I double click into one of these documents, I can actually send them to different users' queues. Okay, maybe I want this first one to go to Kathy. Maybe this one's going to go to my queue, to Jacob Salazar's queue. And then maybe the rest of these are going to go to the invoice entry queue. Okay. I can just make my selections all from here. And then once I'm ready, I can hit split and it'll send these documents to those queues. Okay. So those are your two main, ways that you'll capture invoices. All right. And now Paperless also has some automatic import jobs that it does as well. One of them is the email importer. So what that does is that we build a job in the background that is connected to your accounts payable inbox. Okay, so if you do have an email that vendors send invoices to, we're going to map this job to that. And what it's going to do is, every 30 minutes, every hour, depending on when we set that clock, it'll pull the attachments from that inbox and send it to a queue of your choice. All right, so that's a newer feature in Paperless that a lot of customers are moving to. There's also a folder watch job as well, which if maybe you don't want to connect it directly to your inbox, but maybe we want to select it from a different folder. So maybe we'll have a folder that's called Paperless Scans, just for example. And everything that we want brought into Paperless, we're just going to scan or drag it and drop it into that folder. And Paperless will run off of a clock in the background and pull the attachments from that folder and send it to a queue. Okay, so there are some automated capturing techniques that we can take advantage of as well. So now let's go back to that first example that we brought in. Okay, we're going to go to the queue. Here's our invoice. Okay, now Paperless has a few different ways you can annotate the document itself. Okay, and I'm going to go over those really quick. Down here on the bottom, right beneath the image, if you're following my mouse, this is what we call the annotation toolbar. And there's a few different annotations that you can take advantage of. This first one is a highlighter. So if we wanted to highlight just to emphasize something on the document, okay, we can do that. You also have a sticky note feature where we can go in and you'll just, place the size of your sticky note and then, type in the note and it'll appear there on your screen, okay, on the image. You also have some built-in stamps that you can take advantage of. So if maybe this invoice was past due, I can go to past due here and we can stamp that on there. Okay. There is also a custom stamp feature that we could take advantage of, to add something that's not currently on this list. One common custom stamp that I do build for customers is, some of them like to mark approvals when it is approved, when the invoice is approved. So they'll have their approvers, just place an approval stamp. And you'll notice on this one, I added to where that it'll date timestamp, but also let us know the user that placed that stamp. Okay, so that's just one example of a custom stamp that you could build here in the system. Okay. Now, one thing that I like about Paperless is that, let's say, we've had Paperless a year, okay, and this document is a year old, and we go in and we search for it and we bring it up, and maybe we need to print or email a copy of this invoice, but we see that somebody else has placed all these annotations on here, right? If I go up here to email and I try to email this document, okay, we'll see that it has all these annotations on it, but I have a checkbox here within my email settings, and I can, as long as I simply uncheck this box, I still have access to clean copies of my documents. It's going to remove those annotations once I uncheck that box, and you have the same ability here from your option as well. If I try to print this, I can I can opt to not include those annotations. So you will still have access to clean copies, even if you tag and place annotations on your document. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the invoice entry process. So every invoice has to first belong to a queue. Okay, and the reason that is so that way we know where each invoice started. Okay, where was the starting point? We can always backtrack that in the log, but that's why it has to belong to a queue. Here's my queue. Now, I like giving this quick overview of how the invoice is going to flow through Paperless before I jump into the example. So I have my queue here, and on the very bottom of my queue, I have 3 different tabs down here. This first one that we're currently on is unprocessed. This is where all of my fresh new invoices are going to appear that have not been touched yet. Okay, so ideally we'd want to work through this list and try to clear it out. Okay, our second tab that we have is work in process. Once we have started processing the invoice and when we've started coding it, or maybe we've routed it for approval, it moves into the second phase, work in process. Within this work in process tab, we have some, various different statuses here. So this first one is incomplete. This is where all the invoices that you have started and not yet finished will appear. Okay, so maybe if we're working on an invoice and maybe it's time for lunch and we just want to save it and come back to it later, then it'll be here waiting for you in your incomplete folder. Okay. You have your approved status. So these are going to be all the invoices that I have sent out for approval, okay, that have been approved. I have my pending status for invoices that I have sent out for approval, but they are still pending someone's approval. And if I click on it, I can quickly see down here, who the approver is that has not yet approved it. Okay. And then lastly, we have our rejected status. This is where our invoices that we have sent out for approval, but that approver has rejected them back to us. So the reject feature in Paperless, anytime an approver rejects an invoice, the system forces them to provide a reason why they are rejecting it. Okay, so that way when it gets sent back to the processor, okay, you'll notice that this one's rejected. If I go down here to the notes, it shows that the invoice was rejected, and then it says reject reason, and then I can see that it was the wrong job number. Okay, so they have to type in that reason why. And then now as the processor, you can go in here and read the note and know exactly what changes you need to be made before we send it back out for approval. Okay. So that's the work in process tab. It's kind of, the invoice as it's in process. And then lastly, we have this third tab. This is where all of your fully approved invoices will appear just in a list like we're seeing right now. Okay, and this is where the exporting is done. So this is where I'll see that all these invoices are fully approved. I'll select them all, or just select a few depending on what the scenario is, and I will export this invoice. Now, the exporting process, it should be a daily, daily, once or twice a day type task, and that's going to, once we hit export, it's going to go post those into your accounting system. Okay. So that's how it flows through paperless. Let's go ahead and jump inside the example here. So here's my invoice entry screen. All right. This top portion, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of talk as I'm filling this in. This top portion is what we call the header portion of the invoice entry screen. So it's pretty much the foundation of the invoice. So you'll notice there's there's things like vendor, invoice number, due dates, invoice date, invoice total, things like that. Those are the things that we're going to fill out here. And if you see some extra fields that you don't know what they are, or you're really not interested in, don't worry. This screen here, it actually, based on what fields you use in your accounting system, those will flow into paperless as well, because paperless is connected to your accounting system. And that's why here on the vendor list, this vendor list is connected directly to Sage 300 or 100. Okay. And so it's feeding right to paperless. So that's where we're getting this vendor list. It's not something that paperless generates. It's from your accounting system. I'm going to go ahead and just put in my total here. You'll notice that it automatically filled in my payment terms as soon as I put in the invoice date. Again, that's because paperless is connected to your accounting system. So it knows what the payment terms are for this vendor here. All right, so I filled out what I needed to here on this top portion. Now, the next step is to add my distribution or coding. So I'm going to go up here to new line, and you'll notice that these are broken out into two separate categories. Okay, I have add blank line, and then I have job expense equipment purchase order subcontract. So the blank line is basically going to be a manual entry. So I clicked on job, and you'll notice that job is blank, my phase is blank. Looks like we have some pre-fills from the vendor, but for the most part, you'll have to go in here and make your selections of what you want to fill in the box. So here's my job list. If this was the job I wanted to use, then I could plug that in, plug in my phase if you guys use phase. But it's basically manual entry. Okay, pretty straightforward. Now you'll notice this bottom half of these two options, I have quick list. So as you know, before you receive your invoices, when it comes to commitment related invoices like with purchase orders or subcontracts, you're going to get that information and have that set up in the accounting system prior, right? So if that's the case, then we can opt to use this quick list. And that's what I'm going to do for this example. Because this invoice right here is a subcontract invoice. So I'm going to go here, and it's only going to give me the available subcontracts for the vendor. Okay, I'm not going to get a whole list that I have to sort through. Okay, and let's say this 793, this is the one that this invoice is for. Okay. So here, if we look over here in the top right, okay, I can see my full committed amount of the subcontract. Okay, I can see job cost to date, and then I can even see a paperless unposted, so I can account for everything that's currently in paperless, okay, that maybe has not been exported into the accounting system, and then I have my variance. But then right here, this is where your line items will appear. So it should be very quick and easy. You're just going to select which line item you're going to apply. And now this amount received is the amount remaining on the subcontract line. So you'll notice my total for this invoice is only $150. So that's all I want to apply to my invoice. Okay, just $150 towards this line. I'm going to click on add to invoice, and you'll notice that everything is coded for me. Okay, so the quick list is going to make your life a lot easier when it comes to commitment related invoices. All right, you'll just be able to choose from that quick list and make your selections. Also, if you have the purchasing module or the service module, that does connect to paperless as well, and it's going to work the same way. If you're using service or purchasing, then you'll have a purchasing quick list or a service receiving quick list that you can choose from. Okay? So I made my selections, everything's coded. At this point, I could then move on to the next step, which is route this for approval. Okay. Before I do that, I want to go over some of the buttons that are available here on my invoice entry screen that you can take advantage of. Okay, this first one, this is our sidebar over here on our right. And this first section is alerts. So let's say this is a very, a high priority invoice, a very important invoice. And maybe we want to receive notification as if at any point it's rejected in the process. Okay. I can click on invoice rejected and opt to receive an alert in these three fashions. A regular alert will alert me right here on my computer. And then I have an email and text alert option. Then the alert will say something like, hey, invoice 9911 for vendor banks cabinets has been rejected by, and it'll tell you who rejected it. And so that way you'll be notified of it and then can take immediate action at that point. Okay. Our next option that we have is invoice information. This is just where we'll see some basic vendor info. Down below that we have our invoice notes. Okay, and our invoice notes is, you're going to use this quite often because this is where you can type in pertinent, important information regarding the invoice, or you can use this to communicate with the person that you're about to route this to for approval. Okay. Every note in Paperless date, timestamps, and lets us know the user that added that note. And these notes will be with the invoice, for as long as the document exists in Paperless. Those notes will be visible and accessible. Okay, and then lastly, we have our issues list. This issues list is fully customizable, and you can add whatever issues you want. So just to give you an example, here are a couple that I added. So let's say this particular invoice we're working on needs a change order. I can select that this invoice has that issue, and now this invoice will not be able to be exported into the accounting system unless somebody at some point has gone in here and marked this issue as resolved. Okay, so some other common ones I see are like, needs updated insurance or missing W-9, things like that. Those are all issues that we can add to this list, and you'll be able to have here. And whenever you have an invoice that comes through that has that issue, then you just simply check the box. Okay. This sidebar is, these options are collapsible, and the system will remember how you left it last. And it's a user preference, so the way I set it up, it's not going to be reflected upon anybody else's user. Okay. On our top options up here, these are our main buttons. Okay, this one right here is vendor history. This list here is connected to your invoice register. So your processors will be able to go and look back at past invoices to see how they were coded, and they can use this to help them, reference and code the invoice that they're working on right now. Now, this button here, document match, is one that a lot of customers love, and you'll only be able to take advantage of this button if you are taking advantage of Paperless's indexing capabilities. So if you're electronically filing away all of those backup documents I told you about earlier, okay, purchase orders, subcontracts, packing slips, certificates of insurance, things like that, anything that you would normally attach to an invoice, this is where this button comes into play. So I'm going to click it, and you'll notice that it's going to say retrieving related documents. So what it's doing is it's going in the background and it's trying to find something that's filed away that matches and correlates with the data in this invoice. So if we look up top here, I have my invoice, but look, the system automatically attached the copy of the contract right behind the invoice here. Okay, and it did that all automatically just by going through and searching through those indexes. Okay, so this is why it's very important to index those backup files in Paperless, because you're not going to have to worry about manually attaching. The system's going to do it for you. So this is a really cool feature that Paperless possesses. Also, if you wanted to go in and search for your own document to attach, you have the ability to do that down here as well. Okay, so now as I route this for approval, the approver is going to see the invoice and also any attachments right behind it. Okay, so that's the document match tool. But I'm going to go ahead and route this invoice to an approver. Okay. Paperless does have routing rules within the system that you can take advantage of. If you are using Sage, the Sage project authorization, we can use that as well to so that Paperless will know who to send it to based on the job that's entered in on the invoice. Okay, so that's why we see here, all I did was hit route, it automatically knows who this needs to go to. And if I go to check routing rules, you'll see that I have a routing rule already built so that anytime it's job 201 on the invoice, it's going to be sent to this person here. Now, you don't have to take advantage of routing rules. Some customers like to just have the ability to send it to whoever they want at any given time. That's fine as well. And it'll look something like this. You'll just click on Add Reviewer. Here's everybody who's set up as a reviewer in my system. I can just select their name, hit OK, and they'll be added to this list over here on the left. All right. I'm going to go ahead and route this. Now let's take a look at what this is going to look like on the approver and for an approver. Okay. So invoice entry is where your processors are going to go. Approve invoices was where your approvers are going to go. So the approver screen will look something like this. The list, the invoices that they need to approve are going to be listed right here up and down. One feature that Paperless does do, it actually does filter these out by job. So if your project managers want to, prioritize one job over another, or just want to simply go through one job at a time, they can see how many invoices are outstanding for, this particular job off from right here. Okay. Now the approver screen is very, very simple. Okay, they're going to be able to look at this. You'll notice that, let me grab another example here. I think I can do this one. Yeah, so this one's coded to a job. And you'll notice that if you want them to be able to edit on the fly, or maybe you have a workflow where you don't code it, maybe the processor doesn't code it, but the project managers code it. Paperless is fully, we can adapt to that type of workflow. So you'll notice down here on the bottom, the approvers do have the access to go in. Okay, maybe this is the wrong job number. Okay, they can go down here and change it if they need to. They can go to this cost code list and change the cost code or the phase or whatever. Okay, they can go down here and they have full access to that. Now, if you don't want them to have that access, then we can simply lock these down to where they can't do that. Okay, so the power is in your hands. Some buttons that they'll have access to, again, if we give them permission, are these two right here on the line. This first button, which looks like a recycling emblem, it's with the red and green arrow. If they click on this, they can change the line type. So maybe as they're approving the invoice and they notice maybe this was coded to a job, and maybe it should have gone to a purchase order or subcontract. Okay, they can change the line type right here with that button. Another added permission we can give them is this split line, right? And this will allow them to turn this one line of coding into multiple lines of coding. Okay, and it allocates it evenly. The system does that, but you'll notice I can very easily just click in here and adjust the totals of that line. Okay, now I want to go over the main buttons up top here for the approvers. This is the reject invoice button. So remember, I told you earlier, if an approver is going to reject an invoice, they have to provide a reason why. So as soon as I click on this reject button, there's my text box here, and it says you must provide a reason why you're rejecting this invoice. So this is where they would type in their note, they'll reject it, and it'll go back to the original processor so that they'll know what changes need to be made. Okay. You also have an on hold button, and that works the same way as the reject. Okay. They can place an invoice on hold if we want them to, but they have to provide a reason why they're doing so. Okay. And now one thing I do want to clarify, I'm going to shrink this screen down a little bit. You'll notice that it does indeed show the image in the background. Okay. Again, just if you have dual monitors, you'll be able to have this approval screen on one and then have your full image on the other. But I did want to touch upon that because I get that question a lot. But if everything looks good on this invoice, it's ready to move forward, the coding looks good, everything looks good, then I can go ahead and hit approve. All right, that invoice will leave the approver screen. And now that invoice that has been our example for today, it is over here on our admin tab, okay, ready for export. Again, these are where all my fully approved invoices are. I can select them. Now, if you have Sage 300, there's going to be one added step. You'll hit export invoices here, but then you'll have to go into tasks and then post invoices to, post that invoice and have it be visible in your OpenAP. If you are Sage 100, it actually automatically posts it. So all you'll be responsible for is hitting export, and Sage will post that automatically. I just wanted to clarify that. But that concludes my AP flow portion of Paperless, that demo. Lauren, I will go ahead. I don't know if we have any questions in the chat, but I'll take those at this time.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we do. Somebody asked if it works with service management. So I was thinking maybe could you review the different modules that Sage Paperless works with?
Yes. Yeah. So Paperless integrates with purchasing, with service, both. And like I showed you with those quick lists, you'll have an additional quick list. Now, one thing that you'll have to, that is required for both purchasing and service, the tickets, they do have to be received first in order for them to be accessible within Paperless from that quick list. Okay, so there's a little bit of workflow change involved, but it's going to be very easy. It's going to be as simple as selecting from that quick list what we want to apply to the invoice, and then we'll push it through, run it through the same process, getting approvals, exporting it, and then it'll appear over there.
All right. The next question I see is asking, what is the typical setup and training timeline for getting up and going with Paperless?
Yeah, great question. So it kind of depends on what modules that you plan to use. For a simple, document management and just AP flow type, you're looking at about I'd say 15 to 18 hours of training. And usually, if I have to give a timeline estimate, it's probably about a month. But that all depends on how often you're available to meet. I've had customers that I can get up and running in a week before. So it all kind of depends on your availability. But it's a pretty easy training we'll go through. We'll have a training for admins. So those are for users that have, you want to have full rights and permissions in the system. And then we'll have an invoice entry training for your processors. And then we'll do an approver training for your approvers. And then at that point, you could be free to go. Just kind of depends on the learning curve. Now, one feature that I did want to talk about before we disconnect today is this credit card importer, because this is a game changer here that a lot of customers are really moving to Paperless for. This credit card importer, in a nutshell, what it does, if you have credit cards issued out to your employees, what this is going to do is we're going to get a spreadsheet formatted version of your credit card statement, and I'm going to help you map this, okay? And so we'll look at the spreadsheet and we'll say, okay, the transaction date is on this column, the amount's on this column. But what this is going to do is we're going to bring in that data. So we're going to bring in the transactions on the statement. And if you are indexing your credit card receipts, okay, we're going to index those here in Paperless. And what this credit card importer is going to do, it's automatically going to match the receipts to the items in that statement that is brought into Paperless. Okay, so if you currently do manual matching, which can take hours on hours, this is going to take just a few seconds to run and match all of your receipts to the transaction. Okay, now to take it a step further, Paperless has a mobile application called eCapture. Okay, and we give that app, you give it to your cardholders so that whenever they make a purchase, they're going to have the receipt, they're going to snap a picture of it, and by using the app, they'll snap the picture, they'll hit submit, and that image will automatically be brought into Paperless. Okay, so you no longer also have to keep up with the hard copies of the receipts, which that's a nightmare to try to keep track of. You almost can never get all of the receipts when you're doing it that way. So the eCapture allows you, more efficiently to get a majority of those receipts and have them captured into Paperless immediately. Okay, so just wanted to go over that because this is a very popular hot feature right now that a lot of customers are taking advantage of. Okay, and it's almost worth the purchase of Paperless just for this. All right, was there any other questions?
Yeah, I have a couple more. Does this integrate with Builder MT? And well, the second one's a separate one, so I'll let you answer that one first.
Yeah, so to my knowledge, the Paperless does not integrate with Builder MT, but I can get a confirmation on that. But from my knowledge, it does not integrate with that.
Okay. Also, does each approver need their own license to access?
That's a good question. So With Paperless, the desktop version we're looking at right now, it works off of concurrent licenses just like your Sage system does. Okay, so we can have as many users as we need set up, but only a certain amount of them can be logged in at one time. Okay, so Paperless works the same way. Now, there is one thing that I did not go over today, but it's actually another Paperless mobile app. It's called ePortal. And what the ePortal is a web-based portal that your approvers can go to and approve their invoices. Okay, and so a lot of times when you talk about approvers, it's going to be a project manager type role. A lot of times they're not always in the office, right? They're out and about at projects, always on the run. So this ePortal allows them to approve their invoices from anywhere they have internet access. So they can use a phone, they can use a tablet, they can also just use their laptop and just log into their online portal and approve their invoices. Okay, so that's an option. Now those web options, eCapture, which I just spoke to you about, the credit card receipts, and then this ePortal for approvers, the license structure is a little bit different on those. Those are actually named user licenses. So you will have to purchase one license per person that you want to use it. But it's very, very inexpensive. All of the paperless web applications are very inexpensive. And just to give you a ballpark range, it's usually something like $30 to $35 per user, okay, per year. So not too much. And a lot of customers are moving to those mobile options. Okay. Any other
All
ones?
right. Yeah. So I feel like you kind of maybe already talked about this, Jacob, but we have Sage 300 for AP and GL and job cost. However, we don't have Sage purchasing. Our approvers approve in Builder MT. So just, I guess, basically tell me if you already covered that.
Yeah, so Paperless does not integrate with Builder MT. I'm not too knowledgeable with that software, so I'm not even sure what it does. But if you want to, we can tweak the workflow and try to find a way to integrate both. But yeah, I can't really answer that without knowledge of what that is.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. And you covered the licensing to access question. Had another one that kind of was similar to that.
Okay.
So that was it, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for your time, everyone, today. Just to kind of tell you a little bit more about myself. I actually, before Aktion, I worked directly for Paperless Environment. So I've worked directly for the company that develops the software. So I'm very knowledgeable with it, and I have connections that allow me to get some information that most consultants don't have access to. So just wanted to throw that out there. You're in good hands if you do decide to move forward. And if you have any questions, by all means, feel free to give me a call or send me an email.
All right. Yeah. I will be following up with each of you with the recording and connecting you with Jacob and your sales rep from Aktion. So thank you for your time, everyone who joined us, and thank you for your time, Jacob. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, Lauren.
Mm-hmm.